So we have another History March video to watch, and this one's titled, Why Didn't the USSR Annex Finland? That's interesting. What I think most, I could be wrong, so I apologize, but from what I remember is that mainly this was during World War II, in which Finland was on the defensive against the Soviet Union, and that they actually conducted an impressive defensive war. I can't remember if eventually the Soviets actually did defeat them, or if they managed to remain neutral the entire time, but I just remember that it's often talked about that Finland was impressive in its resistance towards Russia. Let's see if I got any of that right. Let's watch Why Didn't the USSR Annex Finland?
Finland's position neighbouring the USSR was not exactly a comfortable one. From the days of its independence through World War II and well into the Cold War, there were leaders in Moscow who saw Finland's addition to the USSR as inevitable. Yet, as you'll know, Finland remained an independent state. Which raises the question, why didn't the USSR annex it? So, Finland first came into existence during the Russian Revolution. At the end of 1917, as the government in the Russian Empire was overthrown by the Bolsheviks, Finland declared independence. Now, Finland wasn't exactly in a good place at this point, since it was undergoing a brief civil war between the communist Reds and the non-communist Whites. The Whites won, and it wasn't long until some Finns wished to expand their new state at the expense of Russia, which was still fighting its own civil war. By 1920, Finland and Russia signed a treaty fixing the border at this, and in the following 2 decades things remained fairly calm, if tense. Joseph Stalin, who was now in charge, had for a long time wished to restore Moscow's control over the former territories of the Russian Empire, which obviously included Finland. Which is why, in 1939, after signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Germany, he sent an ultimatum to Finland. Move the border to here or face war. Finland chose war. And this war, the Winter War, was, to put it mildly, not a great success for the Soviet Union. Despite this, Finland wasn't in a position to fight forever, and so it agreed to hand over these lands to the USSR and pay some reparations. And it was only a year later that Germany launched its invasion into the Soviet Union, and the Finns jumped on board looking to claim these lands. This war, called the Continuation War, went fairly well for Finland at first, and they pushed this far into the USSR. Now, when Germany's advance stalled, so did Finland's, and by 1944 the Soviets had pushed the Finns back to here. And in this year, the Soviets accepted Finnish talks for peace. Now they could, with enough men and effort, have conquered Finland in its entirety, but Stalin opted not to. This was because it would have cost a great deal in terms of lives and material, and they were much needed in the struggle against Germany. There was also a concern that annexing Finland would mean that Sweden would become much more hostile with the USSR now on its border. In the end, Finland had to sign a pretty humiliating treaty. This saw it lose the previous areas that it had agreed to hand over to the USSR along with this territory in the north. It also ordered Finland to unban its Communist Party and place the Finnish leaders from the period of the Continuation War on trial for war crimes. So it won't exactly shock you to find out that the USSR was not on good terms with Finland when the Cold War was at its beginning. Stalin was extremely distrustful of them, and Finnish leaders were, frankly, terrified that the Soviets would make an attempt at annexing them. Some of this stress came to an end in 1948 when the Soviets brought them a proposal, a friendship treaty. This did several things. It stipulated that Finland was allowed to remain a free and independent nation, providing it didn't allow anyone to invade the USSR through it. It also meant that officially Finland was neutral, meaning no NATO and no Warsaw Pact, but unofficially it was expected that Finland wouldn't oppose the USSR in foreign diplomacy. So this policy was known in the West as Finlandization, whereby a small sovereign nation bordering a superpower does as it's told to maintain its independence, although Cuba didn't get the memo. Now, for all of its derision, the policy did keep Finland independent throughout the Cold War. In the end, the USSR never annexed Finland because it didn't need to. It would also have pushed Sweden into the arms of NATO and lost them an agreeable independent voice in world affairs. I hope you enjoyed this.
So that's interesting. I think I got that right, at least the Finnish resistance and the Winter War. But at the end, Russia, if it had gone all in, could have honestly had gotten, like you say, they could have taken Finland. It was more of a proxy situation, am I right? Like, that's how I'm kind of reading it. Essentially, like he said, they didn't need to conquer them because they had them under their thumb in a sense. Like, Finland was afraid any minute now the USSR could take them, and I guess if the USSR had committed fully, they could have, and I think they both knew that. So it was more of a, okay, sure, we're independent, we're technically under your thumb in a sense, so That was interesting. Overall, yeah, that makes sense. So in a way, they kind of, well, they didn't like obviously. What's the word I'm looking for? Conquer them, but they had them under their thumb. I think is the way I would put it in a sense. So yeah.